Hey, welcome back to our podcast, Project Brightside, where we always look on the bright side even when things are looking pretty dark. I'm Dr. Shelby.
And I'm Richard Brito, and we're your hosts for today's episode.
Topics of discussion for our podcast include society and culture, education, and TV and film.
Each episode of Season 2 will have an interview of a guest speaker followed by a Bright Talk segment where we discuss a complicated topic in hopes of shining light on it.
For today's episode, we'll be interviewing Elizabeth Denham, CEO and founder of Lotus Flower Media, an established author, creator and host of her podcast, The Gift of the Struggle, and she's also a mother. Hi, Miss Denham. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Happy to have you. Super excited to have you, actually. The first person I thought of was you for Season 2. I was like, there's no better person to have on than you. You have so many stories and so many wonderful lived experiences and lessons that you could share with people. So really an honor to have you.
Well, I appreciate that very much. I'm excited to be here and go through the process with you.
To start us off, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to professionally in the last year.
I grew up in Pensacola, Florida. Went away to college, got married, had three boys, got divorced, was in Pensacola for a little while raising boys by myself, and then remarried about 12 years ago. And professionally, have always been a writer, and used that in various jobs, but really didn't find my true career path using my writing in that way until the last 10 or 12 years. So in the last year, I have been running my company, Lotus Flower Media. That's a marketing company. It started off as just freelance writing and has grown into a full service marketing company. And recently bought another business that provides author services to some writers and authors that are in the romance genre and the thriller genre and in the cozy reads genres. But we purchased it in July and are going to expand genres and build it into a little community for readers, to help our authors with a built-in audience. So
I,
it's been a busy few years.
I love that. I'm so happy for you. That sounds wonderful. And honestly, it's so exciting and all the things that I also want to be a part of. So I'm so happy to see you do that. It's inspirational. Share with the audience what kind of obstacles you face, and how you've overcome them.
Interestingly, The Gift of the Struggle has come from, that's my podcast, and the title came from some personal struggles that I had in my life and sort of learned that, in every struggle there are gifts, no matter what they are. And so my youngest son, when he was 2, started having seizures on the hour every hour in the midst of me getting a divorce. The other boys were 4 and 6 at that time. And so that was what I would call one of the pits of my life. I was
Mhm.
mostly staying home with them. I taught ballet, a night or two in the evenings. But when that happens, perspective is everything in life. And so my divorce got put into perspective really quickly. And my focus was on getting my youngest son in a good place, physically. One of the things I talk about with that story is that there's never a gift of a sick child or the loss of, someone, but there are gifts in the surrounding situations. So
Mhm.
in that situation, my older two boys learned empathy. They learned to be self-sufficient earlier than I think they normally would have. I learned where my community was, who my people were that were going to be there for me. People would just show up out of the blue with dinner with no announcement. They would just do it. My family stepped in. My mom helped me a lot take care of the older two boys so that I could focus on the younger one. So, I mean, I think that was one of many experiences that shaped my perspective in life and helped me understand that in the midst of a struggle, sometimes you don't know what the gift will be. But if
Yeah.
you believe that it is there and you eventually will uncover it, it's a little easier to get through those tough times. And so that philosophy has helped me a lot. Even when I'm in a pit, I try to remember that. And professionally, I've had several different iterations of a career, and starting this company, there are a lot of ups and downs. You gain clients, you lose clients. It's not an easy thing to own a business, but keeping that belief that you learn from every struggle is something that really keeps you going, I think.
Beautifully said. Yeah, I totally agree with everything you're saying.
Yeah, that was beautiful. I think that was a really eloquent way to put it as well, because sometimes it's hard for people who are going through something who hear that, everything happens for a reason. But I think that's such a great way to put it that, we would never say that this is a good thing that's happening, but there is something you can take out of everything that's valuable. So,
That's so true. And in those pits, I got really tired of people saying that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And so I had a blog that the title started off as, well, I should be granite by now. Like I've I've learned plenty. Like, when do I get to be hard as a rock and stop doing this?
yeah.
And so I think that people get tired of the trite, overused things,
Yeah.
because sometimes they don't acknowledge the struggle. And so I chose that title because I think that it acknowledges that there is a struggle while also offering the hope of the gift, and then just believing in that. So to me, it's a little bit easier to digest than
Yeah.
that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yes, I think it seems much easier to digest. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I guess the next question that we had for you, and let me know if there's anything else that, you wanted to cover on the questions we've talked about so far. But the next one would be, what really drives you?
That's kind of a hard question, I think,
hmm
in my age and with all my experiences. But I think if I had to pick one thing, it's just always trying to do the right thing at the right time for the right people in the right ways. Um, in everything that I do, I don't always succeed at it, but I try really hard to, follow the North Star of doing the right thing. And I think that integrity is one of the most important things. I think, especially as you get a little bit older, you start to realize just how important those things are to you. And so doing that in your business and doing that in your relationships and doing that in your marriage and with your children, I think that's probably the thing that drives me the most, and really making a difference. So I do some advocacy work and want to make sure that I fight for what I believe in.
Yeah, you're definitely an advocate, a supporter. You're definitely a friend. Like you fit many categories and you've always been a pillar for so many people.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have, whatever it may be, something that anchors you and something that kind of pushes you forward across all these different endeavors and all the various hats that you wear. So, thank you for sharing that with us. So the next thing that kind of leads into this is, what are a few of your biggest priorities before 2024 ends?
It's funny how fast time seems to go by. I can't believe it's already almost
I
September.
I was just doing the count too.
So that question is kind of tough because I feel like I don't have a lot of time. Um, but I feel like, getting my podcast in a really good place. It's had some ebbs and flows, and making sure that this season that I'm in is consistent and quality and interviewing good people and telling good stories. So I want to really make sure I have a rhythm for that before the end of the year. I want to continue growing my businesses and really make this new business that I bought with a partner, see some growth and success, and really get that in a good place for us for next year to have a really great year. And then I think just one of the things that I've lacked in the last few years, and I think a lot of us have with the way the world is and, COVID and post-COVID and all the stuff that comes with that and with political chaos, I think we forgot to have fun, my husband and I sometimes.
Mm.
And we've been working really, really hard because we both had, shifts in our careers over the last few years. So one of the priorities he and I have is just to have fun and not feel so pressured to always be pushing for the next thing, and spend more time with our kids and our families and our friends. And so I think personally that's a pretty big priority for me right now.
I love that, and it made me automatically think of, being present and not really diving so deep into like the what ifs and like having that 3 to 5 year plan and you know being making sure that you're like consistent with it. There is some structure, but it doesn't have to be that rigid. One of the next questions that we were going to ask you was how do you see yourself and your business evolving next year? But this year is already loaded all with, everything that you've said, starting to, you've maintained a really established business and now you're starting a new one. So how do you see yourself and your new business in the next year? Just some like outline ideas that come to mind.
Well, I think, I mean, it's been a pretty big year of growth for my marketing company. And I want to continue that. I've been able to bring on more people on my team, which has been gratifying and scary because
Hmm.
you're feeling responsible for people. But I would really love to be able to continue that and to solidify where we are and be able to offer more services as we go forward. I think for the new business, just it's a business that's been around for 30 years. It's called Writer Space, and a lot of the authors have been around for a really long time. But the lady who owned it before got sick and had cancer and eventually died. And so it's been sort of struggling to evolve over the last couple of years. And so I think with fresh ownership, with my business partner and me, bringing it into a more modern era and building it more from author services into community for authors and for readers. I think with all the technology that we have these days, one of the things during COVID that I did was start a community, an online community for women. So I think with this writer space, building it from just author services into a community for readers and being able to support our author clients that way is going to be really exciting and fun and new. And I think it's going to excite our clients just because it's something that they haven't seen thus far. And I really do enjoy hosting communities and building, content for them and getting people engaged with each other. So those are some things I think professionally that I see on the horizon in the next 5 years, but I'd also like to write another book probably within the next 5 years. I've kind of gotten off that because I've been so busy, but I do think The Gift of the Struggle could be a really good book of these inspirational stories of the people that I've interviewed.
Oh my God.
So
Yes. I
yeah,
totally
that's
love
on my
that.
radar.
Oh my God. I love that. That's a genius idea and I definitely think you should pursue that. Um I love that you just like released that like idea out there and it's like, "Oh, I'm gonna do that," and everyone knows. I love
Yeah, now
that.
you have accountability, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. I'm also very excited for the expansion to the reader element as well because I love reading and I'm very into like the Goodreads community and all that stuff. So I think that sounds really cool.
Yeah, we want to be a Goodreads, only bigger and better.
Nice.
I love
I
We've
like
that.
it.
Yeah, we've got some very talented authors on our client list, and we've got some very talented people on our team. And so I think everybody's really excited to try to bring all of that together.
I'm
That's
excited
awesome.
for you. I'm already excited. I'm already
Yeah, me
excited.
too.
Well,
Um,
we will send you links to be beta testers next week. How about that?
Yes, I would love
I
that.
actually
Thank you
love
so
that.
much. That makes me really happy.
Sounds amazing. The next question you kind of answered already, so it's okay if we want to skip it, but just in case you have anything you wanted to add, the next one was what do you aspire to accomplish within the next 5 years?
Yeah, I did sort of answer that, but I do think so. I talked more about the professional, but I think in terms of the personal, we've been through a lot as a family,
Hmm.
and when you have blended families, there's a lot that happens. We've had custody battles. We've had 5 kids in college at different times. Our last one just started. So I think for our personal goals would be, I mentioned having fun, but also sort of solidifying our financial situation after some pretty big bumps in that road and just feeling stable and relaxed and embracing the happy. I think sometimes when you've been through a lot, and sometimes my husband and I used to joke that we just bounced off the bottom, like we were always in a pit. Um, and when you've been through that much, you become used to feeling like you're waiting for a shoe to drop.
Mm.
So I have been training myself not to wait for the other shoe to drop and just embrace the good things that are happening, because things are in a better place than they've been in years for both of us, career-wise and personally. And, you know, I think making a conscious effort to just enjoy the happy parts, and not always be worried or waiting for something bad to happen. It's an easy thing to get into, and I think between COVID and a lot of the things in the world around us, the political climate and having to fight, living in Alabama, we've had to fight some pretty hard fights for human rights. You begin to feel a lot of negativity and doom and gloom. And so just being able to embrace optimism and happiness and joy a little more than I probably have over the last years is a good personal goal for me.
Very wise. I love that.
That's so important as well. I was gonna say earlier, and I don't think I ended up saying it, but when you were talking about the focus on happiness and now with being present, I think it's important to, I guess we're kind of reflecting on the fact that life's kind of made up of like all the small moments, to be cheesy, in the sense that like when you look back at like your happiness over the past year, there are going to be those big things that, maybe were really big challenges and were very impactful, or really great things that were big things. But how you kind of feel about the year overall outside of those is a collection of all those small moments. So I think it's really cool that you're sharing how you're focusing on that, kind of being present and being happy in those moments, because I think, like you said, it's easy to not do that and get stuck in that sense of anxiety and kind of looking for something else to happen.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, I do think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that it is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as a global collective, we've all been through a collective, basically a trauma with COVID and being isolated and then choosing isolation after that. I think some people got in that habit, and it's easy to fall into those, to stay in those patterns. And so I think sometimes you have to remind yourself that, I mean, it's okay to feel the bad stuff, but it's a choice to find a community to do it with so that you don't feel alone or isolated, or find things that make you joyful even in the midst of a difficult time. Or so I think that as a community, probably we all need to be reminded that we do get to control that.
This leads into the next question. I think it's a very good point to ask. Um, so, what advice would you offer to those who wish to pursue a career like yours?
Okay, so I have a good story for this one. So I did not really use my creative writing degree until my 40s, probably.
Hmm,
Because of some of the pits of life, and just, not having the opportunity. The digital age really opened up the door for my skill set.
that's awesome.
Writing websites and marketing, all that needs people who know how to communicate and write effectively. But when I was at Florida State in my creative writing degree, to get into that program as a junior, you had to submit some of your writing to professors who were going to accept you into the program or not. And so there were two professors who were decision makers. And I submitted the exact same package to each of the two professors. And one of them sent me back a letter and said, "Oh, you're so sentimental. This is not the career for you. You need to find another career
What?
path." And the
Mm.
other professor, who read the exact same submissions, wrote back and said, "Oh, you're so talented. This is really great. Welcome to the program." And so I saved those letters in a binder face to face,
Oh,
so that
that's
I could
so good.
always see that everybody has a different opinion, right? Everybody has
Yes.
a different perspective. And if I had listened to the rejection guy and chosen another career, I would certainly not be doing what I'm doing now. And I was, 20 when that happened.
Wow.
Um, and so I think, taking people's constructive criticism is a good skill to employ. However, believing in yourself and knowing who you are and what your talents are, if you're good at something or not, if you have potential in something or not. I think that internal belief system is so important. And knowing what is constructive and helpful criticism, and knowing what is somebody else's issue. Because if I had listened to that guy, I just kind of was like, huh, well, that was awful. And then the other guy wrote the positive one. I was like, okay, I'm going to go with this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to pick that one and we're just going to go forward with it. But if I had not thought that and I had been so impacted by the rejection, I walked away from it, um, I would have lost something big in my future. And granted, it took me from, maybe 20 years to really get into a career that supported that creative writing and to earn a living at it. But I never lost that belief. So I think my advice would be to really consider what you know to be true about yourself and not let somebody else's opinion of that, you know, take you off your course.
That's great advice. Um, I feel like with what you're saying, identifying your strengths, and with identifying your strengths, you get to also realize what your weaknesses are. But that doesn't mean that you can't, practice on perfecting those weaknesses and one day turning them into strengths. And I know that that's something that you totally embody, and you are someone that takes constructive criticism very well because you are very emotionally intelligent, and that's something that you have to refine and work on and really educate yourself on. And I've learned from you a lot, and what you do is inspirational. And I want to say it like, publicly, because you've accomplished something that is very near to what the Brightside production wants to do, but different. And you have done it so successfully. And your career is outstanding. And you are definitely very inspirational for a lot of people. And I'm glad that you're on this podcast sharing this, because these are like really valuable skills and lessons that um, are very important to share. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And I'm so excited and proud of you guys for this Brightside Productions and Project Brightside podcast. And it's fun to watch the next generation kind of come along and
Yes.
see how they do it differently and what's important to you all. So I'm excited to watch you guys too.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. And I definitely echo what Richard's saying as well. I really appreciate your advice on all of this. But one other thing I was going to add with what you had just shared, um, is just that I think what you were talking about is really applicable to any field. And so, if you know what your worth is and you're confident, in your ability to succeed, maybe not now, but in the future in something, then you're really able to take the criticisms that are actually constructive and appropriate and use them, and then to actually hear the good things that people are saying and use those as well. So I think that's one thing that helps prevent burnout in a lot of careers, but especially in medicine, where you're kind of getting constant feedback from patients and from
Mm-hmm.
other physicians and nurses and administration. And so being able to filter that through your own lens and take what's helpful and kind of leave behind what's not helpful for your therapy
Yeah.
is really
Well,
important.
it's so true. And in that particular field, you're dealing with people who are dealing with things outside of you.
Mm-hmm.
So making sure that you understand that this may be something coming from them that has nothing to do with you. I mean, that's one thing I think that's one of the harder lessons in life to learn is
Yeah.
when somebody comes at you, but it's really not about you. And how do you look at their situation and think, okay, I know this is not about me, but how can I help this person deal or cope or move through whatever this is and whatever got them to this place. We all want to take things personally. I think that's your first instinct generally. Most of us have that first instinct of feeling defensive.
Yeah.
But if we can recognize quicker that it's maybe not about us, then the whole tone of the conversation becomes something else.
Yeah, and I applaud you, Dr. Shelby, for all that you have to do every day when it comes to being a doctor, because you have to deal with all types of personalities, and most of them are at their worst, or others are, not at their worst, but they're mentally, scared or worried and having these phobias or fears that they're investigating, and you're having to deal with that. And it takes a lot of patience and a lot of emotional maturity for sure. So both of you are talented women, and this conversation has been delightful.
Thank you. The last question's a little bit, well, they were all fun in the sense that we got to learn a lot, but I guess a little bit lighter for you is, What's one book or podcast that's outside of ours or yours that you think everyone should experience?
Okay, my answer is not going to be lighter, but I did actually interview this guy on my podcast. It hasn't aired yet, but his book is amazing. Um, his name is Chris Champ Napier, and his book is called Poverty and Prison.
Interesting.
And he is a guy who lives in Mobile, where I live, and he was in prison for murder. And he ended up getting out. He was guilty. He got out. During prison, he finally decided to change his life because one of his best friends died of gun violence. And he turned his life around. He is now a liaison from the prosecutor's office to between the prosecutor's office and the inmates or the accused.
Wow.
And he is working with these guys to help them navigate the system, to navigate plea deals, navigate, verdicts or going to trial. And then he's working on combating recidivism and wants to move toward prison reform. And the thing to me that, so I started this book, I'm not even finished with it yet, but I read about 20 pages and I stopped and I started over and I read and I got a pen and I started underlining um, because it is one of the most compelling books I've read. It's a first person narrative, and he writes sort of in the tone of the age that he was when he was writing about it. And so he grew up in Pritchard, Alabama, which is one of the most impoverished areas and the most high crime areas in our region and potentially in the country. But I mean, it was just one of the most compelling books I've read. And I think if you don't understand what it's like to grow up in poverty, truly, like most of us don't, it's something that'll change your life. Because he is so matter of fact. I mean, he talks about one of his teachers being the Klan without the hood. I
Mm.
mean, he talks about his school being located in an all-black community and what that was like. One of the lines I underlined is laziness is my family's tradition and welfare is a normal way of life because that's all they knew. That was the life that they almost even aspired to. So anyway, I mean, I would highly recommend this book. It's something he's trying to get out into the public forum and strike up some conversations with. Somebody donated 100 of his books to the prison that he was in.
Oh,
And
that's
he is the
awesome.
first person to ever get a pardon for murder in Alabama.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he's just a very inspiring and unique individual and has really truly embraced a new way of life. So anyway, that's a book that I would recommend everybody read.
Yeah, and honestly, thank you for the recommendation. It takes a lot of bravery, to be open with, really difficult situations and mistakes of past or, whatever the case may be. I don't know the specifics of this, but I'm glad that he has turned everything around and is advocating, to help other people do the same. I think that's very insightful. To draw upon the pain and turn it into something good. Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think to articulate it in the honest way that he did, in the beginning I was like, this book could have used a little more editing. And then I got into it and I was like, nope, because it's raw and it's real and it would not be compelling if somebody got in there and changed anything about it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And especially with generational trauma or generational poverty, like there's a lot that we carry with us.
Oh yeah.
If, like you're a part of that or experience that, everyone has their own traumas that they are dealing with. And having to share that with the public could really inspire other people because when you do that, it's like you're opening your vulnerability, you're being vulnerable. You're engaging in that and it encourages other people to, you know, also realize and see the bigger picture. So,
Yeah.
great
I mean,
points.
he saw his dad murdered when he was 3. And
Oh,
so
wow.
he was angry his whole entire life, and you can see why. It's most people can't relate to a story or an experience like that. So
Yeah.
anyway, I think it just really opened my eyes to what true poverty really was and what it's like
Mm-hmm.
to grow up Black in South Alabama.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good points.
Yeah, it's so important to, of course, we can't experience other people's experiences, but we don't really learn what it's like to have lived other perspectives if we don't talk to those people or we don't hear from them. And so I think that's so important in all different types of, people from different areas of life. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So, moving on to our next segment, Bright Talk, where we discuss a complicated topic in hopes of shining light on the matter. This week, we will be discussing finding and using your voice. To start us off, tell the audience what it means to you when you say to find your voice, and tell us about how you found your voice, and then explain how you started using your voice for good.
Those are some kind of tough questions. I
I'm so
think
sorry. Yeah.
no, it's okay. It's good for thought, but I think most of us we all have an inner voice, right? And I think what I have learned over the years is if I don't listen to that your inner voice, I usually regret it. I almost always regret it. So I think part of it is what we discussed earlier, is kind of knowing who you are and staying true to that. And I think then building on that is staying true to yourself through the course of your life. So, when I was younger, I was actually pretty shy. And as I got older and older, I think I would see things in the world that I thought were wrong, and I couldn't not speak about it. Um, I think as you mature and you learn what matters to you and what matters to you about the world that we live in and how you want it to be better or different, you do feel compelled. I felt compelled to speak out about those things. And then when you have kids, I think a lot of women experience this, is when and men too, but I do think that whole mama bear thing is a thing about,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to let somebody hurt your child. And so um, it creates this freedom that you are speaking up for somebody else. But I think using that for not just your own family or children is important, because there are a lot of people that don't have someone to speak for them. And so I think I've always felt compelled. Um, the biggest compliment my husband has ever given me was, he said, I think you are incapable of not trying to do the right thing. You always
Aw.
you have to do the right thing. And I think he's right about that, especially when I see other people being hurt. So once you start, I think it's hard to stop. Like, I've had to stand up for children in our community in different ways and for different reasons. And I've realized, especially where we live, a lot of LGBTQ kids don't have family support. They wait to come out until they've left home. And so I took it upon myself to try to be a voice for those children who didn't have family who was supportive. And whatever marginalized groups, if I have a platform, I feel compelled to use it to help other people. And so, in terms of political activism or advocacy, one of the things I always say is, if white people don't get on board, Black people are going to have a harder time finding their equal in human rights. And if straight people don't get on board, LGBTQ people are going to have a harder time finding human rights. So
Mm-hmm.
I think as a collective, it's important that the people who have the most privilege are the ones who use it to help those who don't. And so I've kind of tried to adopt that philosophy wherever I can and wherever I have a platform. And I think one of the things in doing that over the years, there are years when you're younger and you just argue with everybody and you confront everybody. And that's not generally the way to do it. And as you mature and grow up, I think one of the things I've employed is trying to speak in ways people can receive it. And I think that's why I do my podcast, and that's why I've written a lot of the things that I've written, because I think the best way to reach people in ways they can receive it is to tell a story that makes them feel something.
Yeah.
nobody wants a child to want to die because of who they are. Nobody wants a child to be scared because of who they are. And so if you can get to the most base level of agreement, and sometimes it's basically we don't want people to die. Sometimes you have to get that low down on the list before you can find that level of agreement. But at that point, you have a place to start. And so that's kind of how I've tried to use my voice, especially as I've matured through life and realized, confronting people on social media is just useless. I mean, I think I started off doing that and have since learned, if I can say, well, here's what my family has been through, here are the things that we've lost, because we are an LGBTQ family in Alabama. We went through these things. And then people will be like, oh, well, gosh, well, I didn't know. Or I say, did you know that these laws exist that are very bad for the community? And they're like, well, I didn't know that was a law. And I'm like, well, yes, it is. And let me send you the link. But
Yeah.
so I think coming at people where they can find that modicum of empathy if they are not on the same side of life as you, is one of the ways I try to use my voice.
You make really wonderful points. I like how you started off with um, claiming, that you have to find your own voice first and listen to your inner voice, inner dialogue, with the right or wrong, which most people have the right or wrong senses, but some people don't. They can't distinguish between them, and then that's where disorders come in, and that needs, therapy. But it's very important to identify what your core values are and to navigate the voices that may pop up and identify what is valid and what is not valid, what's emotionally um, valid and not, logically valid or not. Um, and then when you learn to identify that, you could use your voice and break out of that shyness. And I like how you brought it up with how you were doing that, but it got even bigger with your children, having to advocate for them and the advocate in you, you said you got into your career writing wise and flourished in your 40s. Um, I think the timing and the lessons and you were always meant to be a writer. You were always like meant to do this and be a business owner. And I see it. Looking back and how I met you and how you've grown and flourished all these years, I'm just so excited to be a part of your journey. And that you're talking about this topic for Bright Talk. Um, and it aligns very well with what, like, the self-actualization, the steps that you've taken. And it sounds like you're there, so keep
Well, thank
going.
you. I do appreciate that compliment, and it's so definitely something that has evolved over time and experience and maturity and opportunity. Sometimes it's hard to find the opportunity. But one thing I've told all my kids is, you know, if you publish something on social media or you speak an opinion that's unpopular, people come after you. I'm like, that is an opportunity right there because you either believe that you have something valuable to say and you continue to say it, or you find another path
Mhm,
because you can't do both. You can't advocate and speak what you believe convincingly if you're going to let other people whittle away at you.
mhm,
And I mean that also speaks to advocacy fatigue because we all get it, and especially in the last few years. I mean, I've gotten it and had to take a little breaks here or there, but you can't buy into the hate or the trolls or the negativity, and maintaining the belief that things can be better is not always easy, which is why you need a community of people who are working on the same things as you to lean on and find energy from and all those things. So um, it all goes back to that knowing who you are and feeling that you have something to say and not letting other people whittle away at who you are. And that takes a lot of strength, and we don't always have the same levels of strength at different times of life.
yeah.
And so recognizing when maybe you need to take a step back or find somebody to support you or, just turn it off for a little while and then come back to it. Because self-preservation is important, and I think it sometimes gets lost when you're advocating all the time. Um, so it's not the simple thing of just saying, find your voice and use it. There's a lot to it.
Yeah.
But I think that self-belief and that self-determination is key to being able to continue to find and use your voice for good.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of discipline and ups and downs and learning, from mistakes. None of us are perfect. Like we're always gonna have something that's gonna be beyond our capacity. That's gonna take us a second to like refresh our memory and on our core values and what those are and our support systems and whatever that may be to help us re-identify ourselves and our voice and go back to, being the person that we are that advocates. And it depends on, what the person is experiencing, whether that's burnout or, as you were saying, what was it? What was the word that you said with the fatigue?
Oh, advocacy fatigue.
Yes, advocacy
Yeah.
fatigue.
Yeah, it's real. And I think people who are in the fights are, I've seen a lot of my friends, and especially in the LGBTQ, organizations that I support, have to take breaks just for their own self-preservation. So, and being able to respect that somebody might need a minute, and letting them take a break and then stepping in for them if you can, letting them recover and then live to fight another day.
Yeah, it reminds me of don't judge a book by its cover because like you don't know what that person is going through and if they're in their worst day and what they're presenting might, don't take it so personal.
Hmm.
Obviously, there are extents, to that statement of like, don't take it so personal if they're really like, coming at you. But most of the time, when you see someone that's bitter or isn't doing so well, publicly, that might be their worst day. So don't try to avoid it. Try not to take it personal, internalize it. Try to see the bigger picture. I really love all the topics we talked about for this episode.
Me too. This was awesome. Thank you so much for your time and your insightful interview.
Well, thank you both for having me. I've enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed listening to all the previous episodes, and I can't wait to see what you guys do next.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited for season 2, and this is going to be a wonderful premiere. Everyone's going to love it.
With the conclusion of this episode, that's a wrap on the season 2 premiere of Project Brightside.
Thank you so much for tuning in and supporting us. Make sure to recommend our podcast to your friends and family. We have a lot in the works for season 2, so make sure to keep sharing. Until next time, take care.
Episode 1 of season 2 of Project Brightside was executive produced by Richard Brito, Shelby Flohr, Luke Riasti, John Skirbanich, Jake Riasti, Sofia Paez, Andres Gil Arana, and Zoe Rusetsky. Music by Jake Riasti. Edited by Luke Riasti and Richard Brito.